Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Beis. Starting with Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph. 9 lines from the bottom. Omar Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana makes the following statement. Minayin le'imur chagigas chamisha asar shenifsolim belina. Where do we know, he says, that the chagiga, the korban chagiga that's brought on the 15th, the first day of Yom Tif, the emurim are not able to then remain till the morning. They must be then burned before the first morning. Says the Gemara Shenemar, he brings a posuk, V'lo yolin chelev chagi ad boiker, that the fats of the korban chagigo should not remain until the next morning. V'samich le reishis, and since it says reishis in the next posuk, lememro dahai boiker rishon. When it says in the posuk v'lo yolin chelev chagi ad boiker, that which is saying until the morning refers to the first morning. Why? Because the next posuk begins reishis. Reishis, therefore, is coming to tell us it's the morning, the first morning, and not the subsequent morning. Maskif lo Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asks on Rav Kahana, who says that the emur cannot go beyond the first morning. Taimo de cause of reishis, only because it states reishis. Therefore, you explain boiker means the first morning. Holoi cause of reishis hava mina my boiker. If it did not state reishis, what would it mean when it said boiker in the pasuk? Boiker sheni. Then it would mean boiker sheni. You needed reishis to then exclude, to then bring out that it's referring to the first morning and not the second morning. Mi'ika midi asks Rav Yosef, why should we think otherwise? The basar ipsile me'orto ve'emurin ad safra, where you then say that the basar, that can go until then, the next evening. When it comes to a korban shlomim, chagiga, the korban shlomim, it's 2 days and a night. So you're going to say that the basar, that has an additional day, and only that evening will it then be disqualified. But the emurim, which is more chamur, which has more kedusha, that has to be then destroyed before that. There's a hakpada that would have to be the morning, the first morning, even before the basta has to be finished. Omar le Abaye. So again, Rav Yosef is asking for Kahana, why do you need the word reishis to teach me the first morning? It's mistaber when it says boiker refers to the first morning, not the second morning. Omar le Abaye, alama loy. Abaye asks Rav Yosef, why not? Why can it not be a situation where the basar still can then be consumed, yet the emurim has to be completed, it has to be consumed beforehand? Why not? V'harei Pesach le Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, the basar ifsilei mechatzois ve'emurin ad safra. There's a machlokes. When does the basar of the korban Pesach have to be consumed by? According to Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, has to be consumed by chatzois halayla, and yet the emurim only have to then be finished only before the morning. So then we see that the basar can be consumed beforehand, while the emurim will be afterwards. So to over here, when it comes to the shlomim, the korban chagiga of chamisha asar, that we can say that it's indeed going to be brought, that the shlomim can be eaten 2 days and a night, and yet the second morning could indeed be the morning. Sorry, the first morning can be where the emurim are destroyed. It has to be done by the first morning. So that's not going to be unusual to say that the emurim have to be destroyed before, have to be finished and completed, being burnt before the basar is consumed. Omar Rava. Now Rava comes along and he comes to justify Rav Yosef's taina as follows. Rav Yosef hochi kakashile. Rav Yosef was bothered by the following question. He has a brisa that seems to indicate, like he's saying, that indeed that it's mistaber, that when it says boiker, indeed it means the first morning. Mi ika midi. Would we think otherwise? The ilu tana lebosar loy boy reshis, that if the Tana taught bosar, he does not require the word reshis to teach me that's the first boiker, the first morning. Which Tana? We're going to soon see in the following brayso. Rav Kahana le'emurin boy reshis, and yet Rav Kahana does require the word reshis to teach me that's the first morning. Mashma without reshis, boiker means the second morning. Mahi, what is this brisa that indeed Rav Yosef was using to then ask on Rav Kahana? The Tanya states in the brisa as follows. It states, Lo yolin min habosar, asher tizbach ba'erev, ba'yoim harishon la boiker. Here it's talking about the chagiga of Arba Osar. On Erev Pesach, the chagiga is brought, is a korban shlomim, and states that the basar should not remain overnight. And it states the words Asher Tizbach Ba'erev, that the Chagig which was brought on Erev Yodalid, meaning on Ben Harbayim, together with the Korban Pesach, Bayom Harishon La Boiker. Says the Bryce on Daf Ayin Aleph on the top, Amud Beis on the top, Limeid al Chagigas Yodalid Shene'echeles L'Shnei Yomim V'Layla Echad. This comes to teach us that the Korban Chagiga of the 14th is eaten on 2 days and a night. That means to say that it would be the second morning that it would be then have to be finished. Or maybe it's only, perhaps I would say, just one night, 1 day and 1 night. Kishehu oimer bayoim harishon, harei boiker sheni omur. The fact that the pasuk that we quoted states, it says ba'erev, you're bringing the korban chagiga of Yudalid on Bein Harbayim, on Erev Pesach. Then it states bayoim harishon, which implies the next day. And then it says la boiker, which implies the following morning, the second morning, which would be, and it being the morning of Tes Zayin, of the 16th. Maybe it means the first morning. It has to be then finished by the first morning. Then what am I going to mekayim the pasuk that will imply that the chagiga is 2 days and 1 night? Chutz mizu, it would have to be then not this. Kishu oimer boy, when it does say the pasuk im neder oinedava, the pasuk reads like this. It says im neder im nedava zevach korbonoi bayoim hikrivoy ezivchoy. During the day, he will offer up, he'll slaughter the animal. Ye'ochel, he will eat it that day, umemacharosoi, and the next day. V'hanoiser mimenu ye'ochel, whatever's remainder, he will eat, which implies that here we're talking about a korban shlomim, and there, in the case of korban shlomim, in the chagiga, in the korban shlomim, we're talking about that it's 2 days and 1 night. So, going back to the brayso, kishu oimer boy, im neder in nadava, when it states over here, gabe the korban shlomim, and it's talking about 2 days and a night. Limeid al chagigas yudalid shenechales l'shnei yamim v'layla echad. And the fact that it says im neder or nadav, which the im is superfluous, comes to teach us that indeed the chagiga yudalid is 2 days and a night. So the brayso has concluded that indeed we're talking about over here by the chagiga of yudalid that the basar is going to be 2 days and a night. Now the Gemara goes and explains a nekuda in this brayso. Omar mar. It's stated before in this brayso, oy eino ela boiker rishon. Or maybe he challenges himself that it's not really the second morning, but the first morning. Ask the Gemara, why would he challenge himself? Ha'amris ha'amarta kishehu oimer bayoim harishon. You already stated that it is in the pasuk ba'erev bayom harishon la boiker, which implies ba'erev is when the Koran Chagig Yudalid is brought, Then it states Bayom HaRishon, which implies the next day, and then it says La Boiker, which would imply the subsequent morning, which would be the second morning. So once you prove that it's the second Boiker, why does the Brisa, the Tana, come back and say maybe it's the first Boiker? We already excluded that. Hare Boiker Sheni Omur. It's talking about the second Boiker. Explains the Gemara, Hochi Ka'amar. This is what the Tana was saying. Why he came back and suggested maybe, perhaps it is indeed the first Boiker. Maybe the pasuk is referring to the Shtei Chagigois, meaning the Korban Chagigo of Yudal and Korban Chagigo of Tesvav. And therefore, Achas Chagigas Yudal v'Achas Chagigas Tesvav. V'zula Boiker, v'zula Boiker. This one of the Yudal is talking about the first Boiker, which is the morning of Tesvav. And the Chagiga of Tesvav is talking about the first Boiker, which is the Boiker of Tes Zayin. Now, why would he explain it that way? Because unlike the way we explained the pasuk before, when the pasuk states the words Ba'erev Bayoim Harishon LaBoiker, we explained to mean Ba'erev, the Korban Chagiga Yudalid brought Ba'erev, which was then on Erev Pesach, on Yudalid, Ben Arboim, together with the Korban Pesach. Then it says Bayoim HaRishon, referring to the next day, and then La Boiker, the subsequent Boiker. That's how we explain it until now. But the Tana says maybe you'll entertain that this pasuk really is broken up into two parts. And it says, Gabe, the Korban Chagiga of Yudalit, it states Ba'erev, whereby then the next morning is where you have to then finish. And then it states, the second part, would be then Bayoim HaRishon, the Korban Chagiga of Tesvav, the first day of the Yom Tif. And then it states La Boiker, referring to the subsequent morning as well. On that, he brings then that can't be. For that, Hodar Omar, the Tana comes back and brings the Posuk, and says, the Posuk of Im Neder in Nedova, Ela Dekaimulun Chagiga HaNe'echeles L'Shnei Yomim, V'Laila Echad. If you're going to say that indeed the Korban Chagiga of Yudal and Tesvav is referring to the first Boiker, the first morning, then what am I going to do with the pasuk that says that the Korban Chagiga is going to be 2 days and a night? Im Kain, Im Neder, Im Nedov, or Nedova Memai. What are you going to do with this verse, which is talking about the Korban Chagiga, talking about the Shlomim, that's 2 days and a night. Ik Chagigas Yudalid. If the way you're explaining it before, that's talking about Chagiga Yudalid, that it's only 1 day and 1 night. Oy Chagigas Tesvav, if you're going to say it's Chagigas Tesvav, you also said before, Haksiv Ba Yoim V'Laila, it's only 1 day and a night. So how are you going to explain this verse of Im Neder Im Nedava, which is a Korban Chagiga, and it's 2 days and a night? Ela Hai L'Chagigas Tesvav, that can't. Rather, this pasuk of Oyneder Nidava is referring to the Chagiga of Tesvav. The Heich and the other pasuk referring to the pasuk that we brought originally in the Brisa when it says Lo Yolin, not in the Brisa, but rather before Lo Yolin Chelev Chagi Ad Boiker. That's talking about Yudalid. That was the beginning of what Rav Kahana brought. Heich, the other pasuk, Heich Kule Kro LeChagiga Yudalid. That pasuk is talking about the Chagiga of Yudalid. Limeid al Chagigas Yudal Sheneles L'Shnei Yomim V'Laila Echad, whereby the Chagiga of Yudalid is then brought 2 days and a night. Now the Gemara goes back to explain, that was to justify of Yosef. Now the Gemara goes back and explains the reasoning. The reason is that indeed, it states Bayom HaRishon La Boiker, the Mai Boiker. What is meant by Boiker? Boiker is Sheni. Boiker, the Chor would refer to them the second morning. Hakol Heicha Dechsiv Boiker Stama Boiker Rishon. However, every word states Boiker Stama, then it's Boiker Rishon. Only here, because it says in the pasuk Bayom HaRishon La Boiker, Ba'erev Bayom HaRishon La Boiker, then we said it's the second Boiker, as we just explained in the Brisa. But barring that wording, if it just said Boiker Stam, then it always means Boiker Rishon. Boiker Rishon, v'afagav deloy kosav be'reishis. And that was the time that Rav Yosef had. Even if it doesn't say Reishis, what does Rav Kahana have to then explain that Boiker means the first morning? It's Boiker Stam in the Pasuk, because that Pasuk states, V'lo yolin chelev chagi ad Boiker, doesn't say anything about any specific wording. So the Boiker Stam always refers to the morning. Ask Rav Yosef and Rav Kahana, why did then you have to bring Reishis to explain it refers to the first morning? The Gemara now brings the following Mishnah, the final Mishnah in the Perek. And the Mishnah over here is discussing, circling back to the beginning of the Perek. When a person shechs a korban Pesach, sheloi lishma, we say it's possible. And even though, therefore, a person who is shechs a korban Pesach, the korban Pesach normally is doiche Shabbos, but if it's possible, then he's mechalo Shabbos. He did it b'shoige, he's chayiv a korban chatas. Says our Mishnah, ha Pesach sheshachtoi sheloi lishma b'Shabbos, chayiv alov chatas. A person shechs a korban Pesach sheloi lishmo. That means to say either he doesn't know that it's Shabbos, or he shechs thinking that it's okay to shech something that's not for the sake of the Pesach. So he does it b'shoigeg. He's going to be chayiv a korban chatas because it's mechalo Shabbos b'shoigeg. V'shar kol hazvochim sheshachton l'shem Pesach. When it comes to other korbanos, other zvochim that he shechs l'shem korban Pesach, again on Yudal that comes out to be on Shabbos. Im einan ru'uyin chayiv. If these are animals that are not roy, because in order to be a korban Pesach, it has to be a keves or an aiz, either a lamb or a goat that's 1 year old, that it's a zochar. So if it was a different type of an animal that was not, let's say this age, it was beyond 1 year old, then it's not roy, and therefore he was mechalo Shabbos b'shoigeg, and he's going to be chayiv. Everybody agrees over here that it's not considered toyel l'dvar mitzvah, because over here everyone knows that an animal that's not either a keves or an aiz that's a male 1 year old cannot be brought as a korban Pesach. So everybody would agree over here that it's going to be a chilul Shabbos that he's chayiv chatas for. However, what happens if it's v'im ru'uyin hein? If it is roy, it's a keves that is indeed a zachar that's 1 year old, and he did it in this case. It was something that was a different zevach, and he did it l'shem Pesach. So it depends. Rabbi Eliezer mechayiv chatos. Rabbi Eliezer says still he's going to be chayiv chatos, because again he was mechalo Shabbos. He made a mistake, and it's possible, and therefore he's going to be chayiv chatos for being mishoigeg on Shabbos. Rabbi Yoshua poiter. However, Rabbi Yeshua argues, and Rabbi Yeshua says poter, because Rabbi Yeshua says that since all of the other korbanos that are going to be l'shem korban Pesach are going to be ksherim, therefore it's going to be toyeh l'dvar mitzvah. When he made a mistake, he was torah in his machshava for a dvar mitzvah, and therefore that's not going to be mechayiv him a korban chatos. So now the Gemara is going to explain a shakla levitarya between Rabbi Eliezer, who holds a torah l'dvar mitzvah is chayiv chatos, and Rabbi Yehoshua says a Torah l'dvar mitzvah is potter from a korban chatas. Says the Mishnah, Omar le Rabbi Eliezer, Ma'im ha-pesach shehu muter lishmoi. Just as a korban Pesach, if it's done lishmoi on Yudalit doiches ha-Shabbos, kisheshina es shmoi chayiv. Yet if he does it l'shem another korban, he's going to be chayiv a korban chatos. Then zvachim shein asurim lishmon. Then shar korbanos, which are not doiches ha-Shabbos, even if they're done the shmon, that means the korban shlomim, the shem korban shlomim. Kisheshina es shmon eino din sheyechayiv. When they do then change from being l'shma, certainly it will be chayiv, says Rabbi Eliezer to Rabbi Yehoshua, and therefore you should agree with me that he should be chayiv a korban chatos. Omar le Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua responds, Lo, im amarta b'Pesach. If you tell me by Pesach, the reason why indeed it's going to be chayiv a korban chatos is because sheshinohu b'dvar osir, because it changed its designation for being shelo lishma, therefore it's osir, and that's why it's possible. It's chayiv a korban chatos. Toimar, will you tell me, Bezvachim, however, Sheshinon Bedevar Hamuter, when it comes to other Zvachim, when it's L'Shem a Korban Pesach, here we're saying Shar Zvachim, L'Shem Korban Pesach, is Ksherim, and therefore it would not be Chayiv, argues Rabbi Yoshua to Rabbi Eliezer. Omar le Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer says back, Eimurei Tzibur Yochichu, the Korban Tzibur that is brought on Shabbos, like a Korban Tamid, or a Korban Musaf, which is Doiche Shabbos, they will mochiach that if you don't do it l'shem, the Korban, that is going to be Chayiv a Korban Chatos. Shehein Mutarin Lishmon, they are mutter when they're brought Lishmon as a Korban Tamid or a Korban Musaf. Ve'ashoiche Lishmon is Chayiv. And yet, one is Shoichet Shar Zvachim, for the sake of a Korban Tamid or the Korban Musaf, would be Chayiv. Omar le Rabbi Yoshua says back to Rabbi Eliezer, Loi. No, imamarta be'emur tzibur. You're telling me emur tzibur sheyesh lehen kitzva. Emur tzibur is different. They're a person not torud b'machshava, and he's not torud l'dvar mitzvah, because when it comes to a korban tzibur, there's only two korban tamidin on Shabbos, and there's two korban musafin on Shabbos, and therefore it's limited. It's designated to be a certain amount. Therefore, it's not going to be then something that's going to be Torah Dvar Mitzvah. However, Torah B'Pesach, she'ein lo kitzvah, but Korban Pesach, where all of the nation has to bring Korban Pesach, then everybody's Torah in the Mitzvah, since it's considered to be Torah Dvar Mitzvah, he would be yes Chayiv. He'd be yes Potter, according to Rabbi Yoshua. Now, comes out that both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua agree by a Korban Tzibur, again, let's say a Korban Tamid, that which is Doiche Shabbos, there everybody agrees that a Torah Dvar Mitzvah will be Chayiv. So here the Mishnah brings a third opinion, however, that argues, Rabbi Meir Oimer, Af HaShoichet L'Shem Emurei Tzibur Potter. Rabbi Meir argues and says, even when it comes to a Korban Tzibur, like a Musaf or a Korban Tamid on Shabbos, that he will be Chayiv, that he will be rather Potter, because that's considered to be Torah Dvar Mitzvah. Why? Because he's liable to then make a mistake and switch the animals for a regular animal to a Korban Sibur. So therefore it's also considered to be Torah Dvar Mitzvah according to Rabbi Meir. The Mishnah continues, Shachtu shaloi le'oichlav, a person shechts the Korban Pesach, shaloi le'oichlav, for either Zikanim or Chodin that cannot eat a kazayis of the basar, Vishaloi le'menuyav, or a chabura of people who are not included in the chabura. That means people who are not included in the chabura. That's the whole who is shechting entirely for. Or la'arelin u'litzmein. Or he's shechting for arelin, those who are uncircumcised. Or for tmeim, those who are tamei. In other words, he shechts on all of these groups entirely for these people. Chayiv. Because since it's a korban, it's going to be posel. Therefore, he's going to be chayiv on Shabbos for being mechalo Shabbos, for being chayiv on korban chatos. Lo oichlov, vishaloi lo oichlov. If he shechs, however, for those who can eat and partake in a kazayis of the korban, as well as those who cannot, or lemenuyav shalom menuyav, or those who are included in the chabur, as well as those who are not, lemudlim v'la'areilim, or those who are circumcised together with those who are not circumcised, litmeim uldaharin, then potter, because that's a valid korban, and therefore is doiches haShabbos. If he does it, he's going to be potter. However, if he shechs the Korban Pesach and he finds out to be a Baal Mum, he's going to be Chayiv. Since he's sort of checked for the Mum beforehand. When he finds ultimately that there's a Mum in the animal, he was Machalo Shabbos, and therefore he's Chayiv a Korban Chatas. The Mishnah goes on to say, however, if he checks the animal and he finds afterwards that it was a treifa means that it had an internal mum that was treifa. In this case, not a mum, but it was an internal wound that made it so that it will not be able to live on its own within a year. It'll die. And it was found in a place like the lungs or like the brain where it was undetectable before the korban was brought, then it's going to be potter because it's an oines. It's not a shoygig, it's oines. The Mishnah concludes, if he shechted the korban, and only afterwards, subsequently, he found out that the people were included in the chabura before the shechita, they removed themselves from the chabura. In other words, he thought that they were part of the chabura, only afterwards he realized they were not. or he found out afterwards that they died, or that they all became tamei, then when he shechted the Korban Pesach, he didn't know this, and he's not expected to know this, and therefore it's considered to be an oines whereby he's going to be potter from a korban chatos.